Welcome to the Be More Objectivistic podcast, the antidote to collectivism. Our podcast was created for the curious listener who has heard the word objectivism, but is unsure what it means, where it comes from, or why it matters. You do not need a background in philosophy to listen to our podcast episodes. Every concept is explained in plain language, with practical examples drawn from history and the present day. Objectivism is, at its core, a philosophy of life. It asks, what is real? How do we know it? What is the good life? How should people live together? These questions are not dusty academic abstractions. They are the very questions that drive political movements, shape economies, and determine whether civilizations flourish or collapse. Are you ready to begin? Okay, let's go. Objectivism, individual freedom, and democracy. 5.1 Individual freedom as a philosophical principle. Freedom, in the objectivist sense, has a precise meaning: the absence of physical coercion. A person is free when no one is pointing a gun at them, metaphorically or literally, when no one is forcing them to act against their own judgment. This is negative freedom or freedom from, as opposed to the muddled progressive concept of positive freedom, which conflates freedom with the power or resources to act. This distinction matters enormously. If freedom means the power to do things, then a poor person is less free than a rich person, and the government can justify any redistribution of wealth as expanding freedom. Under this definition, freedom becomes limitless license for government intervention. Under the objectivist definition, freedom is a binary. Either someone is forcing you or they are not. 5.2 The relationship between democracy and individual rights. Objectivism makes a crucial distinction that most political discourse ignores. Democracy is a procedure, not a principle. Democracy is a method of selecting governments and making collective decisions. It is valuable because it provides a peaceful mechanism for changing rulers and checking the worst abuses of power. But democracy alone is not sufficient to protect freedom. The founders understood this. They feared the tyranny of the majority as much as the tyranny of kings. A majority can vote to violate the rights of a minority, to take their property, restrict their speech, or conscript their labor. Democracy without constitutional limits on government power is merely mob rule with ballots. Individual rights are not subject to a public vote. A majority has no right to vote away the rights of a minority. The political function of rights is precisely to protect minorities from oppression by majorities. Ayn Rand, The Virtue of Selfishness. The objectivist political ideal is a constitutional republic, democratic in its electoral mechanism, but firmly constrained by a constitution that puts individual rights beyond the reach of majorities. The genius of the American system at its founding was precisely this. The Bill of Rights was a list of things Congress could not do, regardless of how many people wanted it to. 5.3 The historical relationship between freedom and capitalism. History provides a stark empirical record. The societies that have come closest to laissez-faire capitalism, 19th century Britain and America, post-war Hong Kong, modern Singapore, post-communist Eastern Europe, have produced the greatest expansions of prosperity, health, and human life expectancy in history. The Industrial Revolution, so often portrayed as an era of exploitation, was the first time in human history that the living standards of common people began to rise dramatically and continuously. The miserable factory worker of 1820 was, by measurable standards, wealthier, healthier, and longer lived than the peasant farmer of 1720. And that 1820 worker's great-grandchild, by 1920, was unimaginably better off than either. The mechanism driving this improvement was not charity, altruism, or government planning. It was the free market, the profit motive, and the protection of private property that incentivized millions of individuals to innovate, invest, and trade voluntarily. 5.4 Free speech, a free press, and intellectual liberty. For Objectivism, freedom of speech and intellectual inquiry are not mere political conveniences. They are direct expressions of the right to think, to reason, and to express one's conclusions. The mind cannot function under coercion. Forcing someone to profess beliefs they do not hold, or silencing them when they do hold, does not change reality. It merely prevents the correction of errors. Intellectual freedom is particularly under threat today, in both authoritarian regimes and in democratic countries where social and institutional pressure toward conformity has grown alarmingly powerful. The campus speech codes, professional deplatforming, corporate diversity mandates, and the social media cancel culture are, from an objectivist perspective, forms of soft coercion that undermine the epistemological conditions necessary for a free society. 5.5 Property rights as the foundation of all rights. Objectivism holds that property rights are not separate from other rights. They are the economic expression of all rights. The right to your life means nothing without the right to the products of your labor and effort. If the state can take your property at will, it owns you. If it can control your business, your wages, and your investments, you are an economic subject, not a free citizen. The erosion of property rights through taxation, regulation, and expropriation is therefore not merely an economic issue. It is a moral and political one. Every increase in the government's power over economic life is a decrease in individual freedom. Thank you for listening to our Be More Objectivistic podcast episode. In an era of surging collectivism, government expansion, and ideological conformity, understanding objectivism has never been more urgent. Whether you are a student, a professional, an entrepreneur, or simply a citizen trying to make sense of the world, our podcast episodes give you a foundation, clear, logical, and grounded in reality, for thinking about freedom, morality, and the future of human civilization.